Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Heidi Frail, co-chair of the Athlete Recreation Group, Pirelli.
Good evening,
Co-chair.
everybody.
And we're calling this meeting to order, Monday, February 27th. And I'd like to start this meeting with a little roll call of attendance. So we've already said our names. Katie King, Assistant Town Manager.
I'm Sue Barber, Conservation Commission.
Stacy Morley, Partner Director. Federica Lamont.
Bassick, community member at large.
Susan Welby, CPC. Michelle Gannis, Partner. Okay, and I think we have one member on Zoom.
Hi, everyone. John Conley here.
Hi, John.
Hey, John.
Okay, so the first order of business is to take a look at our previous meeting minutes. But I hope everyone's had a chance to look at the minutes. There were no edits, there were no comments, I assume that means everyone's good. So, do we have to do them separately? Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the minutes? So moved. Second? Second. Okay, so we're gonna vote the minutes. Roll call. Okay, so if we can go around. You want to start?
Yes.
I say yes.
I,
Yeah.
Aye. John's yes.
I,
Guess yes, yeah. Aye. Okay, fantastic. Meeting minutes for January 17th and January 31st are approved. And so the next item of business is just a debrief from the public hearing. So we met on the 31st here. You were not here, but we had a lot of participation from the public, a lot of very positive public comment, I thought, representation from many groups, but very specifically the pickleball consortium, the dog park people, and the skate park people. And in fact, I think that was really it, right? There weren't too many other groups or individuals.
No, that's it. It was, but it's not just a dog park, it's off-leash dog opportunities. I just
Okay, noted.
make that clear because
Okay, noted. So did anyone have anything that struck them that they wanted to discuss or mention?
I was just looking through all the emails that we received, and there is one request for a RIC. That was the only other request that was added in over the last week.
Okay. Some of us were at the meeting about class and field last week. And there was a broad representation at that meeting from softball, girls softball in particular. And so even though they didn't specifically come to these meetings or comment at these meetings, I feel like there was a lot of discussion. And so I just want to note their interest in softball fields. Okay. So yes, so in addition to the public comment, we got loads of emails about all of these subjects. And there were a couple of others, but for the most part, those were the big groups. Those are the ones that have kind of the most support. So we were going to maybe take a look at Stacy's updated spreadsheet that talks about the facilities and what we have available, and then discuss our unmet needs. And it would be my hope that we could determine amongst this group the first and second, or first and an alternate possible locations for a skate park this evening. I think the skate park, as we've discussed, is just the hardest one to cite. It's got the most land and the most criteria. So if we could together come up with a first and second location that we could sort of recommend and vote on as this group, I think that would really move us forward, because then we can both work on the town meeting recommendation for the feasibility study. And then we can also let some of these other needs that have fewer the other amenities and have fewer needs sort of fall into place. Okay,
I add a question to our possible, add a question to our agenda. With regard to the pickleball, I know we're focusing on the skate park and that's totally great, but in terms of pickleball, I just have one thing that I was curious about from the pickleball group, and I don't know if you have an answer to this. Maybe you do right already. Whether they're asking for more than we had proposed, but whether for them having more courts in one location is preferable or equal to having them spread out across.
I think parking would be an issue if we had them all clustered together.
Depending on where they were.
Yeah.
Like if it was in an area where there was enough parking,
Yeah,
or if we could include parking. And I'm just curious, kind of again, like logistically speaking, if we're looking to work with them on additional courts, but anyway, that's just something that was.
Madam Chair, I think that if we come up kind of with both of those buckets, like a place that we can expand, we can put, let's say, 8 courts, and the ones that we can do 4 courts or smaller amount, and then with that recommendation, go back to Park and Rec. And Park and Rec will look at that and say, okay, here's the focus that we want. The court track, whatever the number is, and that would be a Park and Rec decision, is how I see it. But this group could look at kind of both tracks and then move up to Park and Rec, how they want to handle the demand.
I would say the thing that is glaringly obvious is they want dedicated courts.
Okay.
So whether that's clustered or spread out, they are specifically looking for dedicated courts.
So not even like basketball. On the
I think they were more speaking to not on tennis courts.
okay, so maybe we could look at that spreadsheet. Stacy, is this the updated?
It is the updated, yeah. And there's 2, there's this one with the blue and red on it, which site, and then there's the activities list separately that separates the needs and the requirements for the spaces.
I could just add, Madam Chair, these lists, you know, Stacy and I worked on, but the activities list, if anyone sees anything that they question, please call it out. So like pickleball, I put medium noise. That might be worth a discussion. So I just want to say like this, feel free to call something out if you want to question it.
Would a hockey rink be added on to that?
I mean, I think that's for this group to decide. There's only one email about it. I know that it is not a priority of the Park and Rec Commission at this moment.
I'm sorry, I can hear that.
The ice rink,
Oh, ice.
Indoor, outdoor.
outdoor.
Um,
No, sorry, indoor. Sorry, indoor, but like a whole facility.
yeah. Well, right now, I think the priority of this group is the outdoor. Yeah, since a rink would be indoor, I'm gonna call it for this particular group. We have enough to focus.
I agree. We looked at that, and I think that'd be something.
Football plays.
We had heard at night.
Early
People
morning.
didn't?
Oh,
Early
yeah.
mornings, like before noon.
The question was, does
Yeah.
pickleball need lights?
Yeah, but just, I heard, what I recall is that they mostly wanted mornings and midday, not so much evenings, but.
I think some of the emails.
Some of the emails?
contradicted,
Okay.
Like, said they would like,
We did get a lot of folks saying, you know, they want to play after work.
Okay,
I think there's an after work crowd that was voiced some.
okay, all right, so. With regard to placing one of these things, like I said, I think the skate park is by far the hardest one to cite, so let's just focus on that for now. It's not the end, we are moving on to all these other things, but let's get that one sort of out of the way if we can. So I'm gonna ask Stacy, do you have any thoughts?
I do, I think all of my thoughts have a caveat because I think there's 2 there's 3 excellent locations for this park.
Okay.
I think Cricket is one. But that involves the removal of the building that needs to be either removed or renovated in general. That would be my number 1. The other 2 would be Hillside, but that really depends on what's happening there, so that's like a longer term. And then, I mean, I think anything on here, you could argue Greens is the best space, but I think Greens is limited. Space wise and noise and lights wise. So I think that would be my order of what I think and thinking. For Cricket, there's less parking needed in general for skate park. There is some walkability, there is sidewalks to this particular place. You know, and it's pretty accessible.
What about lights? That's residential there, right?
It is residential, I don't think lights would be an option, I mean, I don't know, that would have to go to planning and zoning and the neighbors. But I think lights would be difficult in many of these places. So I didn't put too much focus on lighting.
I'm sorry,
There's no public safety parks. I mean.
that have lightning?
There's.
Lighting.
Yeah, they generally, yeah.
Okay. That's helpful, yeah.
So scratch on your.
That's fine.
That's what I thought, so thank you for your time. Yeah.
I would just say that, you know. So we don't get too far in the weeds and say the caveats, that's what the feasibility study is going to do and give a price on. Okay, if you want to do lights, then here's X, and if you want to expand the parking, it's Y, then the decision can be made. So thank you, Stacy, those recommendations. I think that gives us a start. I always thought Claxton with the kind of that area that's already been removed, we had a discussion that maybe that could then be, you know, concrete, put concrete over it and do something with that. Do you feel anything about Claxton? I know it's not the most walkable, so maybe that's why.
So
the
that's
issue.
for the skate park in particular,
Yeah.
there's no sidewalks to Claxton, so it makes it really difficult. But on the idea of putting cement down, that is one of my thoughts for pickleball courts,
Okay.
because of the same idea.
In Greens, are you thinking where the basketball court is? What are we thinking?
I would, if you're staring at the basketball court and you're on Pickering, like. Sort of towards in between Pickering and the basketball courts,
Mhm.
Along the fence.
along the fence. But that makes that space very busy.
Yeah.
It reduces the open green space in the middle of town. We don't have a ton of passive parks. That's one of our few mostly passive parks. But location wise, it's ideal. But it would have to be a smaller footprint of an action park.
I would just be. I think hillside is an option, but in terms of accessibility, yes, there are sidewalks, but it is. An incredibly dangerous sidewalk for people on skateboards, like I think that would. be Really treacherous for people to.
It's also more,
in the crosswalk.
I will tell you, the kids go there and skate now on half days. Based on
Down
my,
the hill and.
based on my middle school son who walks. They walk to the high school and hang out, and then from there, they do go to Hillside now. So whether it's dangerous or not, it's accessible in the sense that they walk themselves there. So that's another issue, but
Yeah.
I do know that they do it and hang out on skateboards there.
Yeah,
Regarding Hillside, I tend to agree with you, Michelle, but also like with a building there that has plumbing. I would really be reluctant to use any space that is already plumbed that we could use for an indoor recreation space at some point. You know what I mean? I mean, I guess we could use the parking lot and the area around it, but I think that's a great space for something
yeah,
different.
I guess I would just, I don't know, I'd hate to see us invest in a partial change of that site only to down the timeline and decide that we want to use the whole site
Right,
for something else.
yeah.
What would limitations be with Cricket?
Can you repeat that?
What would the limitations be with Cricket?
The biggest limitation would be removal of the building. But in order to renovate that building, it would be very costly, so I think.
Mhm.
We've done some feasibility studies over 10 years ago, and because it's the plumbing is the biggest issue, you'd have to tie in the sewer system, it's the whole thing, so. It would be a very expensive capital project just to upgrade the building, I think. I mean, I think the biggest limitation would be the noise and the neighbors, but it's already a multi-purpose field. It is already a busy field. It does have a playground. Then the biggest limitation, I think, would be parking. I think we'd have to figure out a way to add a few more spaces of parking and accessibility.
How about the tot lot at the Fazer? That's been talked quite a bit on future that. What are the
So
thoughts?
currently it is in the capital plan this year for design.
Yeah,
To redo the top lot. There is additional space that could field that. I don't know about, because of the location of the wetlands. And the inability to we're not allowed to cement the parking lot. I don't know about putting cement there, that we would have to go to Concom about that to make sure that was feasible.
okay,
And again, it's,
with the conservation, yeah, I know there's, and I know there's conservation restrictions over there.
It
also
is.
might be walkability.
it's walkable for middle school, certainly. Less walkable for high school kids. I mean, if we get high school kids.
I guess Greensfield, I love the location and I know everyone loves that location, but. Being on the committee that helped with the restoration, of course, and then the. Playground, which wouldn't be disturbed. I just know that the green space is such a big deal for people and keeping that whole thing and the neighbors and then even the basketball court. Was tough to get there with the neighbor. There was some opposition, not that. That should be a huge factor, but. I guess crickets, I know cricket, that buildings has been very difficult as far as trying to come up with a plan for that. So I'd probably push that and hillside to the top. With maybe a really easy third. I don't care, do you know how much as far as money and funds we're looking at, so can we get? We're looking at 2 locations for this.
In the feasibility study,
Yeah.
yeah, I think Park and Rec, I put it in for wanting to,
For 2.
yeah.
What about, Perry Park?
So Perry Park. The limitations there is there's a current playground. That is heavily used. It is more of a pocket park than anything else. It's in a very dense area. The parking is extremely limited there. And there's also a diamond that gets used, so there's like this middle space.
Where the
And a basketball court. But then you're threading the needle with. But any kind of option, you'd be threading the needle, because to remove either of those things would be detrimental to both groups.
Can I also, maybe it's a question, perhaps, if we are able to get the largest plot of land, that's what I would want to go with, because I think at the end of the day, you get more bang for your buck, right? Like, we don't want to spend X amount of money and have a small park when for like not that much more, we could have something that's really usable and big, available. And I also like the idea of having it be someplace kind of its own thing, which is what I think cricket would offer. I mean, just it has a little bit of a playground and the fields, but it would it would separate kind of, which is good and bad at the same time, because sometimes parents have a range of kids, for example, who might want to do different things. So anyway, but I'm very in favor of the cricket field location specifically because I think it just gives us the most area to work with.
Yeah,
And
I think-
least restriction.
I mean, to me, cricket field is clearly the number one, but we need to come up with an alternate as well. Right, so,
I agree though with because we're talking about an action park, because when we look at it. And it would be horrible to build something small and the kids are like, you know what, I'm just gonna going to Hyde Park, I'm gonna go to Framingham, and no one uses that. I remember we tried that, it was well thought of to put those things at the pollard, the bumps, and it's like, nice, but if you're gonna do it, you gotta do it. You gotta have it and I think greens is too many limitations, it sounds like, to make it as big as you want to, so.
Right.
Again, cricket, I think is great, I think Hillside would be great as a second. I just don't know, as far as spending the money on feasibility, then it comes down that there are too many roadblocks to make that work.
Right, we don't know what's gonna happen after school admin, like what could be the next, it could be a swing space for something else, and then we're just playing the waiting game. I don't know what the
Yeah.
plan is after that.
Well, I mean. To me, it seems like since we have a fairly solid number one, I mean, maybe that's enough of a
But isn't
contingency plan to have, even though we understand that Hillside is a big old question mark.
Yes,
Isn't Hillside a really big space though?
Yes,
You know, so if you're only taking out 12,000 square feet, it's not a.
Well, yeah,
right,
yeah, but if you decide you want to turn it into something entirely different, then you might need all that space. It's just,
I just wanted to raise that, right now, the Hillside is still a school property, and so, just recognizing that schools are not at the table right now.
that's my,
So I think maybe it would be worth adding a second alternate,
That's what I-
so that we can have, you know, that's. So that those conversations continue offline if, in terms of the park and rec feasibility study, if that's funded at town meeting. If the schools are comfortable including Hillside or not, just so that we're not making that decision for them, but we're not.
Do you mind if I mention?
Crossing the boundaries.
it's not a. Well,
go ahead, just,
I really want to interrupt.
yeah, just real quick, what was your point?
You guys, at some point, everybody down to the person that people say it's not, but the triangle, there's two other places, the triangle at Memorial, which I know is probably political, at the end by the house, at the end of the football field, and that triangle that is here between the track and the, gazebo is actually
Yeah.
sort of perfect amount, and I know there's issues for politics and budget pieces. Those are two that
Thank
people
you.
discuss.
Thank you. Okay, so if you're gonna. We wanna pick a second alternate, or we wanna?
Yeah,
just-
I would, I think. Can you talk about Mills? Mills here. Seems to be plenty of parking, seems to.
there is parking, it would be, you would, ideally, you would put it in the space that the current basketball court is, and then sort of expand into the green space. It is accessible by sidewalks, like we do have that, it is just a further, it's even further than the other two.
Would that have been a spot for pickleball courts?
It could potentially be another spot for pickleball courts, yes.
Does seem like the pickleball people, by and large, can drive.
Yes.
So if pickleball were to move from Mills, which is maybe more sidewalk accessible.
Yep.
Then we could replace those pickleball courts at a different location that's
Mhm.
further afield.
Beyond the location, it seems. Being farther away, seems like a good location otherwise.
Mills?
Yeah, as you think.
Yeah, I don't disagree, it would be taking, the only thing that I struggle with is that is a passive green space. And we would eat into that passive green space because the basketball court wouldn't be big enough. It wouldn't eat that far, but it does sort of cut into that area.
But there's still,
But other than that,
There's a lot there.
there is a lot there.
I feel like there's a lot of space
I do
still,
too.
Where-
even, but
Yeah, where I'm thinking it wouldn't affect any trees necessarily, so that would also be an option, but yes.
Seems like a reasonable. Spot, at least for the feasibility study, to talk
Yes.
about that.
Right, how much seems to.
I would just. I would worry about prioritizing that over greens. I understand greens is smaller, but having something that's accessible to kids. Mills is not that. I don't think parents would allow kids to go off on their skateboards to Mills. Like, that's not accessible to the broadest group within, even just from the vicinity spot. So I just would be reluctant to prioritize mills over greens. I think location would override size in that instance.
What about? And I don't know, because it is a pocket park, it's one of those passive recreation spaces, but Bolton Park that's off of Harris Ave. How much is that used? Where is that? I don't even know.
Very in the middle of the neighborhood. And it's like right in front of people's house. I mean, it's, it is just like an island. Yeah.
Okay, so kind of like over by you, that triangle park.
But way
It's
smaller.
more tighter.
Way.
It is?
It's
Yeah.
tighter to the houses. than
Yeah.
the
Oh,
one
closer
in-
to the house.
Okay. I don't know. I think that would be like
It would be odd.
essentially in people's.
It would feel odd, I think,
Yeah.
I would say, as somebody who doesn't live there.
Yeah. Okay.
It's where they plow the snow because they don't want to overtake everybody's front yard. So
Got
the
it,
snow
okay.
goes into that space.
Good idea, though. Keep thinking.
But I think if you're in the Heights, and I know where I was, depending where we live, but the Heights location, that would be walkable to Mills, if you're like in that general vicinity, and I know that Needham, we're looking at a bus like Newton does with Nemo, right? To be able to take people around, and high school kids even would be in that cohort. Well, I understand the center of town location, I just don't know if Greens would do it.
Yeah, I don't know, I feel like. The center of town is not really that close to a lot of people's houses. Well,
It's a lot.
it is
closer than
close,
Mills.
yes, but I think that the folks who live close enough to the center of town have a lot of amenities already, and it's just a question of like. You know, Central has a good sidewalk all the way down. As does Highland, so I guess I don't really, it's clearly not in the center of town, but I don't agree that it's not. And not safe.
And I think with the new Muzzy site, they're gonna do Pool Street changes anyway, so it might be even more accessible,
Right.
like infrastructure.
Make sure it's just really good sidewalk.
Very well.
I would agree with you on Mills, that I would put Mills over, definitely over Hillside, I think.
Could I hillside to get to Mills.
Maybe a question for the group.
Pass hillside to get to Mills.
Yeah, no, but Hillside for different reasons, like was saying. We shouldn't.
Yes,
Just to make sure we're thinking through it, I just want to ask the question of any of these top sites, is there anything that we're displacing that we're not comfortable displacing, or if it's pickleball or off-leash dogs, is there, if we make a decision just about Action Sports Park, is it canceling out any others? Just to think through it from that angle.
Well, certainly Mills, I mean, there's already pickleball there.
There
Or playing
is
too.
a popular, not necessarily current off-leash area, but it is a popular space for dogs.
But this wouldn't necessarily rule out that use.
No,
Because they're on the field, I've seen them on the field, right?
yes,
There's
but
other
also
issues, they're all there in that.
the,
There's that fair amount of open space that isn't field, right?
yes,
Mhm.
Yeah, it's just space.
I think it's a great space, I know the location would not be ideal for the sun, but
All right, so is my understanding correct that we all more or less feel like Cricket is the #1 location?
So
What is- not so much.
used for now? Is it? Just,
currently,
yes.
there's a small playground, that needs upgrades. And 2 multi-purpose fields. There is an old diamond, a small Little League diamond, it's not used for Little League anymore, so there's a backstop there that. So it's really just the 2 main fields. And there's a half a basketball court on the hillside part of things.
But is it used for like high school lacrosse or?
Yes, Yep.
But we
high school
would take
athletics.
over the fields,
No,
right?
no, no, we wouldn't have the field at all.
The-
It would just be where the building footprint is. Sort of near, like adjacent to the current playground.
They used the fields a lot for soccer and
Yeah.
lacrosse, and I think something else.
Frisbee and cricket.
There you go.
Yeah, there's-
But I don't think that would.
No, we wouldn't impact the fields. That would be,
Still play.
For camp programs under Park and Rec. If something were placed on cricket, you use cricket field, don't you, for some recreational?
we no longer use cricket for our camp programs because the building is no longer
Oh, okay.
occupiable. Is that a word? Did I make it up? I made it up. Anyway, we can't put the kids inside. So we have moved that program to one of our other locations. But yes, for many, many years, that was our location for our mini evergreens, our 3 to 5 group. But do we live in it?
Well, I just had a question before to Fazio, because I know that's been brought up in emails as well, and of course. Your big user group would be Paul, right, so coming to. I know the top lot's not available, are there any other? Locations that we can see at the Fazio that would be feasible without. Doing a lot of. Work or. Infrastructure between fields or anywhere else that.
I think for division, the only option would be somewhere within that top lot fence that is currently, if that is an option. What Josh brought up, the green space between the track and the Carlton Pavilion. It is actually heavily used by our track teams, the high school track teams. It's sort of like the space where the kids put all their stuff. And we tend to use it for rec programs and some soccer overflow. So it is, while it's becoming more scheduled place, a more permanent place than it has in years past.
We feel the top lot will be heavily used once it's.
So the current idea, and again, we're not yet at the design, we're going for design money, but the current idea is to reduce the footprint of the current playground.
Yeah.
To the top right corner, closest to the small field.
Sure.
And keep that the top lot, and then the other space would be open. And so it would just be a matter of
Conservation.
the conservation, the wetlands issue
Yeah, I know it's been. An issue, we
And-
can partner, you can get that.
and concrete.
Yeah, of course. Okay, I'm satisfied.
Okay, so, do we want to take a vote among the group to see if cricket is indeed our number one recommendation? So it'll be yes or no for cricket.
Yep.
Okay,
That's good.
all right,
So I'll make that motion that we highlight cricket as the number one option for the feasibility study for the action sports park, skate park, action
sports park, actually, sports park.
Right.
Okay, so, great.
Yes,
Aurelia, yes.
I,
John?
Aye.
Okay, that's made a lot of progress.
good.
All right, and then as far as our alternative that we want to recommend for this study. We talked a lot about mills, we talked some about greens. Am I forgetting anything else?
No, hillside, but that would be after discussion with the school committee, so
Okay,
I'd like to see that on
greens.
But we sort of said we have 2 alternates.
Yeah.
Or is that what you
Oh,
were
that's
saying?
the two alternates, okay. So,
So 2 out of 3.
well,
the. Ain't bad.
well, we only need 2 alternates, and Hillside is one.
Right.
So we'll have Hillside as one of our alternates. And so now we have to decide between Greensfield and Mills. How do we pursue that?
I would move that Mills be our second. Mills and Hillside be our alternatives, not one.
Okay.
Mills and Hillside be alternative sites. For feasibility.
Have a second? Second. Okay, so,
Yes,
really, yes.
all right, yes, but, I Mills to me, I'm worried about pickleball courts, because it seems like an ideal area. We had pickleball courts, that's my reservation.
Okay, we would definitely have to. If we took over the pickleball courts, I think we would have to replace them. So it's not an either or,
I mean,
but it would be either or probably.
I'll vote.
Okay.
Hi.
So they know what it's doing. I would know.
Okay.
Okay, that's totally fine.
Michelle,
John,
what are your
Yes.
thoughts?
Yes.
so.
And Stacy, just to be clear, this would be, ideally would take the basketball and a portion of that, but the pickleball, tennis courts there would remain, right?
Tennis courts will remain untouched. correct?
Okay, thank you.
And a feasibility study will tell us. I mean, are we saying that it's gonna take the basketball court, or would feasibility study will tell us what our options are?
Yes.
Okay.
But that area of the basketball courts plus the adjacent green space, that's what we would be looking at. I would ask the feasibility study. And whether or not it can be next to, or if it has to encompass both.
All right. Great. Okay, well, congratulations, that's one thing down.
So. Co-chair.
All right, so what else do we think we can accomplish this week? Do we want
You
to?
think pickleball, we
Want
can
to-
address that, you have recommendations?
We're actually only half an hour in, so I feel like we should
Yeah.
make
I think
that.
Stacy's ready for pickleball.
I'm tempted to go home, but I think we should keep going. So talk to us about pickleball courts.
I think the top location, in my personal opinion, would be Claxton. I think you can get the most number of courts there in that one location.
Which is how many?
I am certainly not an engineer,
Don't do math in public.
Ballpark, I'm not.
so I'm gonna say at least 8 courts. So that looks like 4 tennis courts, if that helps people, to imagine.
Envision.
You could even get up to 10. There is some slight restrictions on conservation land, certainly. But I think also putting cement down on that area is certainly helpful. What my understanding is pickleball is much more early morning and some evenings. So the parking in the evenings wouldn't be too much of an issue. We still would have user groups certainly and using the fields. But there is overflow parking at the town forest as well. So I think for that would be number 1. I think number 2 would be Mills, the site that we were discussing for skate park.
Like a little complex up there,
We should.
right? Yeah.
We could. And again, I think those two, I think Claxton gives us the most space for dedicated courts. And I agree that we could also put a basketball court or a basketball net on one side of it so that it could be a multi-use space. There is no lighting right now. And we would not be able to, with the current regulations, it would be very expensive and tricky to add lights. Because we wouldn't be able to dig down to put the post in. We would only have to dig up. Now in Lexington, they did that by building giant cinder blocks and putting the posts on. So it's not out of the question, but it is more difficult. Part of the Claxton project right now is to upgrade the lights that are currently there using the old poles. But that won't throw enough light on that area that we're talking about. West.
Can I ask a question about Claxton? I have not been completely following all the soil issues and things like that. Are you saying that what you know right now with the concrete was? I guess I'm trying to avoid going down the route of recommending Claxton if it just gets mired in all this other stuff that it gets held up.
So we should know in like the next couple of months what the full view of the soil is. So by the time we would be building anything, pickleball, it wouldn't we would know for sure, but that being said, any outcome of the soil testing, not digging down and
Is a good
place
thing.
concrete is a good thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just didn't want to, I mean,
Yeah,
it
it's
seems
good
like a
question.
reasonable location, but I just didn't want to go down that path, if then we're pretty sure it's just gonna be sort of in some other place. you know,
Yeah.
but- Okay.
Okay. Sorry, did you have that? Well, I was just, 8 to 10 courts. How much, we have some softball space there. I just want to make sure we're not taking space.
It would not impact, the area that I'm speaking of would not impact the current field or the current design for the upgrades to that field at all.
Do we still pass the Stacy or have you thought of that? Or we do for tennis? Do we do it for pickleball?
We are,
Okay,
starting this year, we are doing court badges. So anything that plays on a court that's not a basketball court would require a badge.
so it'd be good that way we can get an idea of the demand for
Yes.
the actual demand. I think class would be a terrific idea. Lights would be like any other place where you can't play tennis even at the high school, right? It's just, it is what it is, so. I just have one question as far as multi-purpose. I saw a pickleball court that also ended up being a volleyball court, when the different lines, and then, like you said, basketball. When does that get to be too much? Like, should we just devote it, maybe, like you said, to pickleball and then a hoop? Or are we looking at pickleball and tennis coexisting?
In an ideal world, we would have dedicated courts for pickleball and dedicated courts for tennis.
Okay,
I think that relieves a lot of pressure and a lot of the wear and tear on the courts,
Mhm.
certainly. Adding a basketball hoop, like a half court hoop or something at the end of one of the courts, I think is reasonable, certainly not a big issue.
Okay.
And it wouldn't be necessary, but I think looking into all those things would be an option.
we can add it on for feasibility, at all.
Stacy. Two questions. One is, if you don't have dedicated pickleball courts and dedicated tennis courts, will there down the road, will there be complaints from tennis players and the pickleball players? And my second question, I know it keeps saying that with pickleball players, that it's only in the morning and late afternoon. Wouldn't there, I don't understand why we wouldn't have pickleball players during the day too.
It's a good question. So I'm not saying that they would never be there. I would say that the bulk of the use is tends to be in the morning and later in the evening. We do see use on the courts all times of day, but the heavy use is early in the morning, like basically before work, before the day starts, and then at the end of the day. Which is helpful because the softball fields are used heavily from like 2:30 to dusk,
Yeah.
basically. So sort of balances it out a little bit.
But I think we should with the fence, to build a fence around that area, just give them this.
No, we would have to just, the concrete slab, would we have to build a little thicker. You can support a fence with just a thicker slab. It's the poles that have to go down deeper. And a fence for a pickleball court doesn't have to be the same height as a tennis court. It can be like a 4-foot fence, so it doesn't, it's even less need.
Are there other options that besides class and means that you're thinking of?
Those are the two that really like. Because you don't want anything too close to a school, because then it shortens the time
Yeah.
of day that people can use it. I think you could say anything could be good at Hillside, but I think it really depends if it ends up some sort of school space or rec space, it could limit the play. These two locations would not limit any play. That is true. They were given exclusive use from 7 to 12 on those sports. Hence the heavier use, but there is additional use of emails, and a lot of the emails did speak to that.
What is the status of Newman right now? I know there are tennis courts there that are heavily used, not in the best shape, right? There's there pickleball too, is
There's currently not pickleball at those
okay,
courts. The only pickleball lines currently are at Mills and at the high school courts. And the high school is obviously limited to no play during the school day. Because of the proximity.
so if we added, let's say we went with, Claxton. And added what, how many courts did you say, 4?
I think 8.
8. So therefore, you wouldn't have to do Mills, that would turn back to tennis exclusively, or we keep the lines there, and how would that work? I mean,
I think if we had dedicated courts,
Yeah.
we would keep them pickleball dedicated and tennis dedicated, at least at the start.
Mhm.
And then start to review the use as, like, if it gets busier, if there's more need for one or the other, then we can make those decisions, but I think. Starting off with the dedicated courts would be helpful.
Can I ask going after that? So between Mills and the high school now, how many pickleball courts do we have lines?
7 currently,
Okay, so we'd be losing 7 and adding 8
yes.
if we did that. Okay.
But they'd be dedicated, so you'd have more time on them as well.
not sharing, that's right.
Sorry, so we would be removing their privileges on the other courts if we built dedicated courts?
That would be obviously for the commission to decide.
Yeah.
That would be my suggestion, at least at the outset, to see where the need is. There is more than a likely chance that we would need to still share the courts at Mills. Because pickleball is growing and it's not slowing down.
Mhm.
But I would just recommend that we start slowly and see where that goes.
And one other question, wasn't there some concern that pickleball players were just regardless of whether they were dedicated courts or not, we're turning them into pickleball courts for their use?
That did happen in the beginning. I think we have rectified that situation by painting the lines down. That was back when we were taping lines. But now that we have the painted lines, that situation has gotten significantly better.
Well, it seems like Stacy at least has a very clear favorite and seems totally reasonable to me. There also seems to be a pretty clear number 2. Mills. So I would love to see us make this official. Somebody have a motion? Mr. Burley?
I will move the recommendation. And I just had a question, but before I do that, why don't I do my question instead of during the discussion? There also could be an option where Claxton, we have new ones, because that's gonna be more money, and then do like a resurfacing possibility at Mills
Yes.
to make it nicer, so
Mhm.
if Claxton doesn't work, I guess Mills would be the alternative, but you could might even do Claxton and then see how much it is just to kind of upgrade Mills with.
Yes,
Better
all of our
support.
tennis courts need some
Yeah,
upgrading,
yeah,
so yes,
okay.
I think
Okay,
that would be another option.
so I would move that the committee recommend Claxton as the number prioritized use for pickleball. And then the second, the alternative would be the courts at Millsfield.
Again,
Any more discussion?
Can I ask just one question? So if we were, can we add additional courts to Mills and still have an action park? Is it one or the other for expanding? So does that bump the prioritization of Mills from the action park?
I think there's space to do both. Because I think there's space to do pickleball courts. I don't know that we get 8. And an action sports park. I'd really have to look at the green space. There is a lot of green space, but there's also a significant amount of trees over there. And so that might run into some concerns, but
Just worry about that being option 2 for both of these.
We could ask the engineer when they do the feasibility, how that will
Yeah.
work together,
Yeah.
they might have been more creative, you know.
yes, I do
I
not.
think that's answer the question, is it one or the other?
Yeah, that's right,
Yeah.
yeah, they could answer that question.
Super. Anyone else? Okay, then let's vote. Almost everything's.
Aye.
Aye.
I,
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 Aye.
and John?
Aye.
Excellent. Okay, so for pickleball, we're gonna look at Claxton for our number one and Mills as our alternate. Well done. Excellent. Okay. Do we want to-
I thought something that's maybe the longest.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna talk a little bit about our added agenda item, which is discussion of extended off-leash AM hours at Pollard. And just by way of a tiny bit of background, the town has allowed off-leash early AM hours inside the fence at the Pollard tennis courts. And there was a hard and fast time limit so that the dogs had to exit the fence by 6:45. A little dark, a little cold. So since school doesn't start for a little while, the clock, I think, or maybe a little earlier than that, we're talking about
7:30. Just so folks know.
7:40.
Yeah, technically, kids arrived, I think, around 7:30 and school technically starts, I think, at 7:40. Just so people have that context.
Okay, so we were talking about allowing the off-leash dogs to continue to use the tennis courts until 7:20. Which has been, there is no objection from the principal at Pollard or the superintendent. So, discussion?
Is there any downside? I was just gonna ask about school parking and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
if the principal says it's okay, then I sort of feel that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea is that 7:20 would be a hard stop, and they would just, get in their cars and go, or walk, or whatever they do.
The tennis courts aren't level with the parking,
No, I meant,
and the people that walk the dogs are walking.
oh, they don't take a car
They're
to,
not
nobody
driving.
takes like a car with their dog to the, because I was thinking they're filling up a spot that a teacher needs to get to school. That was mine.
It's walking.
So my question is, it's just the law, when you can't be on school property beyond the time of start of school. But my question would be, why not make it until 8? It's not like the kids are out there.
I think that the school has found that it interferes.
Okay.
If it goes beyond the start time. So it's their wish that everyone's cleared out before school starts. And this is just to extend, to allow them to use more of that time before school starts.
So in terms of determining that time, could that be set by Tamitha?
Yeah, they said 7:20.
Oh, they said so.
They said,
Okay,
Yeah.
right,
got it.
so there's a
But-
recommendation, that's exact.
Right, so that gives them more than an extra half an hour. I think.
I feel like I defer to the principal.
Mhm.
I'm sort of.
Yeah, and so just to say, this, I mean, this is not this is a very specific discussion, not about off-leash dogs,
Right.
not about
This was a-
parks, not, this was a specific request about an existing situation, so it's not like we're not yet talking about all the others, we're gonna get there, but. All right, so any more?
I have something, I didn't understand our committee to be involved in any current operations. So I don't see what role we play or should play in any change of a current rule or non-rule.
Right, so I guess the way it came, John, the chair of the select board, because the select board created this committee, just asked, because dog parks, and as I think our charge is written, you know, any other outdoor recreation activity, it's pretty, including but not limited to. So the request was made for us to make a recommendation to the select board, on this. So it's not, I guess, binding, from this board, it would be a recommendation, and it's my understanding that the school committee has let the superintendent make that call as well, so be a recommendation to our board if this were the change in direction, and that was the request. And I believe our charge, I know it's a little bit different, but I believe our charge covers it.
Yeah, I disagree. I don't think it's our charge, and so I'm not gonna be in support of it.
Understand?
You know?
It sounded from the summary that it was to allow for the use of the tennis courts for tennis playing. I think that was what the initial timeline was, but now that they're not being used in that way, then that time restriction sort of no longer applies or is applicable. That was my understanding from the summary. Is that different? And how is that time, kind of like that time was initially created in order to allow for shared use?
It was pickleball at 7 o'clock.
And then it was
on beach, right, and then the pickleball people did not show up. So right now, the animal control officer will not let a dog off leash inside the tennis courts, even though the gates are closed. Past 6:45.
Well, because
Because
that's the agreed upon
Yes.
time. So we're
That's what we're
talking about
trying
Yeah.
to make it official.
changing that a little bit.
Yeah, you're right.
Did you have? Yeah, I'm still confused about the timing, so. I mean, I understand what you've said, but then this question of the time ended so that the pickleball people could come and play. Pickleball was okay on those courts during school hours or no?
No,
No,
nothing was
see-
allowed once the weekend.
Yeah,
Oh, okay, because I was like, wait a minute, but then I don't understand. Okay, got it. Thank you.
sure. Anything else?
I move that we extend, or we recommend extension of the off-leash AM hours. Extend them to 7:20 AM.
Last discussion?
Yes.
Yes.
I,
John,
No,
okay. All right. So those hours are approved. Okay, I think that's it. Our next meeting, well, does anyone have anything else we want to bring up before we adjourn?
Are we talking about citing dog, off the dog areas or not?
Well, we do need to do that. But the purpose tonight, I think, was to make sure that we had a recommendation for a town meeting, that we could move that forward. These are the sort of most infrastructure intensive of our of the amenities that we need to cite. So we're gonna encapsulate that and then sort of
Next meeting, I
Next
think
meeting
we'll take up the dog. It'll be a-
maybe
Okay, I think that.
Broad discussion.
Sharing that.
Right, and there are a lot of sites here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
could I ask, I mean, as a non-dog owner yet, but very much attuned to the needs and desires of dog owners, like, could we just like spend 1 or 2 minutes giving us an opportunity to maybe have some take-home thinking to do before next meeting? So I'd like to know kind of what people really want, so that they can go, let it percolate and come back with some thoughtful ideas or do some of our own research on the side. And you can say no, Fred, I said we were done talking.
Yeah. Well, I think the only issue is that I think it's really hard to get into a conversation like that and then cut it short. Because I think this is tends to be a pretty emotional issue and a little bit contentious. And so I hesitate to like start and then not really get into it. And I think it's gonna take us longer than just a little bit.
Right, and I think we have a
This would
spreadsheet,
be- This is like a whole new, so.
and I would take home the spreadsheet and go through it and see what the needs are for a dog park, large, small, and then try to figure out where you land on both of those and then come back with.
Can I
recommendations.
emphasize one more time
Yep.
that it's more than a dog park.
Sure.
It's not just a dog.
Yeah, but I think this is exactly what we're saying is that, like, you've emphasized this now a few times, so clearly this is a
But it's,
very.
you know, like, it off leash could be in the town forest, it could be at Ridge Hill, it could be.
So that's the take home that
Yeah,
we need to have. So we're
yeah,
talking
so-
about a dog park, right? About what you would.
I think
suggest.
though that-
Very far, but
bigger.
people can
Right.
just take their dogs off leash for a certain amount of time or anywhere. As
Right.
long as they're responsible dog owners, you know. things
Right,
like
I think
that.
though that, for me, one of the reasons one of the things that we haven't heard is from the other folks, like we've heard a lot from dog owners, we haven't heard a lot from other people, and I think that that's something that we really need to get into. And so I would rather we have one complete discussion all at once, than chop it up and not have everything heard or said, or whatever. So I am gonna say, no, Fred.
Can I just have one question?
Yeah.
Have, information at the next meeting, we talked offline, I think, at the end of the last meeting about what the town's oversight of the golf. Course is for off, so there's been, my understanding is it was allowed off leash, it wasn't. And there's some question about whether the town in their lease, is it in the lease, does it, could we just get information?
Yeah, please.
If we get information at
I
the
did
next.
follow up on that. Thank you so much for reminding me.
We can talk about it next meeting, but I'm just saying, I think
Yeah.
it would be helpful for the context of
Yeah.
where, you know,
And we
the
can,
town's oversight and where the lease stands and whether off leash is in the lease and things like that for the next meeting.
yeah, so under the town's general bylaws, it says that dogs must be leashed, and then there's a subsection that says the town can pick particular areas to allow off-leash dogs. So there was no, I don't believe, like, formal granting of allowance to the golf club to let off-leash dogs, but I'm sure. I'm not, it wasn't that they couldn't do it, but it's not formally like something voted, like the dog park at Rich Hill. My understanding is that, the police department had asked the golf course to put up a sign that just mentioned the bylaw, which is that dogs must be leashed.
Okay,
So that's where that ended.
okay. I just wanted to know what the sort of
Yeah, no, great question. I
the environment was.
And that's the bylaw that applies to all of Eden, that's the thing.
I can include that in the next.
That'd
packet.
be helpful.
Yeah.
Just-
Yeah, just so we understand. I think that's what I'm just trying to.
Sure.
That's what, so I can understand better.
Sure.
Sure.
But even though the golf course is leased out from the town, it's still considered town property. I don't think that's the case.
It's town, it is town property that's leased out to the golf club, except for a certain portion of it is owned by the golf club. Near the clubhouse, but there is a lease in place. That we extend, it's a 20-year lease. We just, town meeting voted on it, oh my gosh, maybe 9-10 years ago. I think, so. We have the copy that lease.
All right, so our next meeting will be here on March 13th at 5. And we can, that's what this meeting is gonna be about. It's gonna be about off-leash dogs, whether in parks or not. And so we'll get those regulations sent out and everyone can take a look at the spreadsheet and come with ideas. We've also, you know, had tons and tons of emails, so we can look through those and see what people are asking.
Do people have any other ideas for skate parks and pickleball? Are those off the table now, or?
Yes, we voted.
Yeah, we voted those and it's time to move forward so that Stacy can get that feasibility study. All right, great.
Will we adjourn?
Second.
Stacy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Aye.
Hi. We vote. To adjourn, yes? John?
Hi.
Excellent.
Adjourn.
Hold on, thank you.
Thank you.